are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Empowerment Podium. We are about to start our 16th live stream for the channel, so that's very exciting. For those of you that are returning, welcome back, and for those that are new here, welcome. I'm so glad you guys are joining us today, and I really hope that you'll stick around. You can join this community by subscribing to this channel, following us on Instagram, TikTok, and liking us on Facebook. The links to those socials are in the description down below. I'm so happy to be joined by today's speaker on such an interesting topic. Today we're going to be following the Q&A format, so if you want to get in on that Q&A and you have a question for today's speaker, please feel free to submit any questions you have in that chat feature, and we will try our best to get to those during our discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to present today's speaker, bring her up alongside me. Today we're joined by Natalie Metz. Natalie majored in International Studies at Boston College, so another fellow Eagle. During undergrad, she interned in Dublin for a summer and then spent a semester in Galway. After graduation, she stayed in Boston to work for an Irish-American nonprofit, and then in 2019, she moved to Belfast to pursue a master's in conflict transformation and social justice. She's now working for Age and I, a charity sector organization that provides well-being, advice, and care services to older people across Northern Ireland. And today she'll be sharing her expat story and all that she's learned while studying, living, and working abroad. Welcome, Natalie. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, so let's just dive right into it if you're good to go. I know that you've clearly, as I was saying in your bio, you spent a lot of time studying abroad between both your undergraduate and your graduate studies. So can you recap for us where you've studied and what have been some of your favorite aspects about each place and program?
Yeah, so hello from Belfast. We went to Boston College together, and while there, I had the opportunity to do an internship in Dublin for a summer between sophomore and junior year. So I was there for 2 months. I was living at a university there, but I was working, which was really great. It was my first internship experience, so it was nice to sort of, in my first time living in a different city, I had coworkers that could show me around, and I sort of got to know Dublin as more than just a student, which was really great. And then that same year, I spent a semester in Galway, Ireland, so just over on the other coast, which is still my favorite place in the entire world. I love Galway so much. You've been there with me. It's so fun. So that was sort of the quintessential study abroad experience. It's not a huge city by U.S. standards. It's really not a city. The school was great. We had a lot of options for classes, but it really was sort of emphasizing, you're only here for a semester, take some interesting things that you might not take back in Boston. So I took a class all about castles. I took some, European feminism studies things. I took, Irish folklore and literature. I sort of had the opportunity to dive in a bit more than I maybe would have at BC, but I was an international studies major, so luckily it all kind of fit what I was looking for anyways. And Galway itself was just the perfect place to be a 20-year-old college student. It was all college kids. We got on very well with the local ones. Really, it was a fantastic semester, and I met some of my best friends there who you now know as well, and it really was such an amazing semester. And then, so I got back to Boston after that, and my vague 5-year plan at that point was, all right, I liked what I did in Dublin. I liked the nonprofit sector. I liked that sort of job. I loved living over here. I still love Boston. I want to be back there for a little while. So sort of the goal was to get some sort of internship that would hopefully lead to a job in Boston that would allow me to come back over here eventually. I wasn't specific about a city. I just really was thinking, grad school is something I want to do, but not right away. I didn't know what I exactly wanted to do it in. So I wanted to work for a couple of years in Boston, get a bit more under my belt, and then use that student visa opportunity to get myself back over. So that ended up being Belfast for me. I was over here for work because I worked for an Irish-American organization. We were in Belfast and Dublin in the fall of 2018. I visited Queen's, the school I eventually went to, and I just immediately had a feeling of this is a place I could see myself. And the conflict transformation and social justice program, which is quite a mouthful. Essentially, it's anthropology and politics, was a very unique one. So I think that was something specific to Belfast that I was really excited to get to know. And now I've been here nearly 2 years. Most of that in COVID times, which is a whole other thing. But Yeah, no, it's been fun to get to know, again, another new city. It's smaller than Boston, so it feels a bit more manageable. There's still areas I haven't been to, and that's great. I like exploring, but I feel very comfortable in sort of what I've learned here and, how I've settled in.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you've definitely, I think, hit all of Ireland and Northern Ireland between all of your studying and working and internships and stuff, so that's amazing. And I think it's really cool that you just like kind of up and moved over there, and it sounds like you found a really awesome place, and I'm sure that Belfast is a really good place to study what you were studying, considering their whole past and everything, so very, very cool. So kind of piggybacking off the academic questions, but obviously there's some differences between the European and American higher education systems. I studied abroad in the UK, in London, so I kind of got a taste for that. But what have been some of the biggest differences that you noticed, and how have you kind of adapted to those changes?
Yeah, so I think at the undergrad level, there's a lot more differences. You probably experience this for people, whatever course they're doing, that's really all they're taking, whereas at least with our experience, we took sort of general requirements, like it's a bit more varied, and you don't have to decide quite as early, whereas here it's very focused from the beginning. You go in to study math, you go in to study medicine, whereas I'm very indecisive. I ended up transferring schools back in the US because I couldn't decide what I wanted to major in, and what I wanted to major in didn't exist in my first school. So it would not have worked for me at undergrad level. But what I really like about the higher education system here, for the master's level, is that one-year masters are a lot more common. So at home, if I'd wanted to do a program in international relations, I would have had to do a 2-year program, probably done $60,000 a year, gone into debt for a sector that I'm not going to get that back. So just realistically, it wasn't going to be feasible for me at home. Whereas here, it's a lot more affordable, even as an international student, to study here. But also, I just really liked the sort of 1-year focused. You can do more general degrees. Like I was sort of in the anthropology department. I knew several, anthropology master students, but I liked the interdisciplinary major or nature of mine, of the conflict transformation, social justice. I liked that it was quite focused for the 1 year. I think also you end up having a lot more of that international sort of focus here in terms of the lectures that you have and the things you're exposed to. I had some amazing lectures at BC, but here I you get the occasional American, which is always funny to me. Like one of, my dissertation supervisor was, English, but from here we had, from all over Europe, we had staff. So you get a lot more access just sort of because of where you are, which I think was really important, particularly for what I was studying. And, some other things are different, like the grading is a little bit different. That was sort of hard to get used to. But I think, again, at the master's level, a lot of that was, it wasn't a huge struggle for me for the most part. The real only roadblocks were like some of the language was different, like what I would call a class, they would call a module. What I would call a major, they would call a course. Like it's all, once I learned that, which I still sort of don't always know. Or I have started to say I went to uni because here college is something totally different. College is high school. So I have slightly had to adapt my language. But I think while the higher education systems are fairly different, I think it does work really well for what I was looking for.
Very cool. Yeah, there's definitely, I'm sure, little nuances. Like, I think when you were sending stuff over to me, I saw organizations with an S versus a Z. I'm like, that's a different spelling, stuff like that. But
every device I use is set to either American English or British English, and so it's different everywhere I type it, and I just can't quite get it. The only thing I'm good at is the extra U in like color and favorite. I refuse to do it. It's an unnecessary letter. They're the ones that will die on.
Little protest, Well, obviously you've already kind of touched on this, but you elected to go abroad for grad school, and you've also decided now to work abroad following the completion of that program, which is awesome. Congrats. But what made you decide to, I think you've touched on this a little bit, to look abroad for your grad school, and then what are some of the benefits and disadvantages that you discovered from doing so?
So, I wanted to do grad school abroad for sort of what I said before, the 1-year program, a bit more affordable, but also it just is a really good way to live abroad again. It's very hard to get a work visa depending on where you want to go. Student visas are a bit more flexible. We'll talk about the visa process later, but the student visa process was so much simpler. Because you are here for a set amount of time. There's some limitations on sort of what you can work and stuff, but it was a really good way to get myself back over here for what at the time maybe was only a little while, now is an undetermined amount of time. And then I decided to stay to work after, partially because I do really like it here. I feel very settled. I was in Boston for 7 or 8 years before this, and I love it. And I'll probably end up back there eventually, but I'm just not ready yet. But I also, with COVID, I was only here for 6 months before COVID hit. So there was so much I didn't get to do. And even now we're a bit behind the US. So we still have a lot of limitations on dining, and, we just got pubs back a little while ago. Travel is still pretty limited. I managed to make it down to the Republic of Ireland last weekend for my first big trip since February of 2020. So I'm slowly getting to do a lot of the stuff I wanted to do. And, it was, I'm happy with the decision, but it was definitely a tough one of, moving abroad for anything. There's going to be so many bureaucratic roadblocks, but this process in particular was quite tricky.
Yeah, and I can't imagine. COVID is, obviously through everyone, but I can't imagine having been there 6 months and then you're basically locked down and stuck there. So
I was living alone. I had a lot of the other students in my course were American, and a lot of them decided to fly back to the States. Others stayed. I really never debated it. I always thought I would stay. It just made more sense to me. But I'd only been there about 6 months, and then, suddenly I was by myself in a, little flat that, and so many people that were supposed to come, you managed to come visit me before, but a lot of other people haven't been able to because of it. And I haven't been home in a year and a half.
You haven't been able to
family since February 2020. It's been a weird time.
We've got to get COVID behind us so you can hop around Europe your dreams. All right, cool. So you mentioned this, but I know you had to deal with some visa difficulties, particularly when you moved from the student visa to the working visa. So, what are some of the biggest challenges or roadblocks that you've come across in that process of both studying and now working abroad?
Yeah, so it definitely is a complicated process. Again, the student one is pretty straightforward. Your school gives you sort of your code that you use when you apply, and the process is pretty set out. I'm sure it's different with COVID now, but I had to go to a center in Boston and get fingerprinted and photographed, sent my passport off to, the embassy, and then they sent it back with my visa, and that it took all of a couple weeks. So that was great. But you also have a lot more support from the university, which was fantastic. And just nice to know if I had to ask questions, I could. So then with the work visa, the student visa that I was on, so my program was a year. I started in September 2019, and I submitted my dissertation in September 2020. From September 2020, I then had 6 months on my student visa that I could work unrestricted. But I needed, within that 6 months, to find a full-time job that could sponsor my work visa. So that was the tricky part, is the sponsorship of the visa. So you don't just need to get a job, you need to get a job that will sponsor you. So they need to have a separate license. Which is, especially with Brexit, it's gotten a bit more complicated, because it's not just, Americans or Canadians that need this one. Now everyone from the EU needs the sponsorship. So there's a big backlog of companies applying. So as I was sort of because I started applying to jobs last summer. I knew I was trying to stay. I knew I wanted to, have a job vaguely in my sector. I love working in the charity sector. And I used my dissertation a little bit to sort of network. I wrote my dissertation on the development of the community and voluntary sector in Northern Ireland, particularly through the sort of lens of victims groups, because of the, post-conflict history here. Genius. So it was, it didn't really work, because I didn't really manage to network that much, but I also I'm interested in it. So I had a focus, which was good. I knew what kind of jobs I was applying to, but then you have those extra steps of, there's certain things that the home office here needs to make sure that the companies have. You need to apply through the company, and then sort of your own application as well. So it took me until this April to get it sorted. And I technically overstayed a visa, and I got retroactive extensions, so I'm fine. But it was a very stressful process. So sort of going from, I know I'm applying to these jobs. I got a job offer that fell through because they couldn't sponsor me. So it really just ended up being lucky with the next one. That, they were able to apply for their sponsorship license. Once they got their license approved, I was able to apply for my skilled worker visa. And then it's just, fingerprints and things, and then they send it through. And that part felt very anticlimactic. Like, I've been putting nearly a year of work into this, and you're just going to mail me something?
Yeah.
So now I am officially legally here, which is very exciting, only on a year-to-year basis. So next May, I'll sort of have to go to the home office and be like, yep, still here, still working, I'm fine. Okay. So, yeah, no, it is complicated. I would recommend to anyone thinking of it, just ask as many questions as you can of people that have gone through it, because I was lucky where people in my program were going through it at the same time.
Okay.
So, like, I had an immigration solicitor through my job. My friend, who's also American, had one through her job. We would compare notes of what her solicitor was telling her, what my solicitor was telling me, what seemed more helpful. It's very overwhelming. Yeah. And crazy. You don't always get good news either. I know people that have asked for extensions and not gotten them. A lot of people had to go home. Basically. I mean, I had flights booked because I thought I was going to get sent home because my visa hadn't come through yet. I maybe was going to have to fly back in April for an undetermined amount of time. And I shouldn't know. Yeah. Yeah. Until about 3 days before.
That is so stressful. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And a lot of it is due to COVID as well. They're very backed up normally with, all sort of the new Brexit rules, but then COVID really didn't help. So I think it was a particularly unique situation. Yeah. It also, though, it meant they had a lot of extensions specific to COVID. So I was able to get one of those, which was, but also came in weeks after I needed it. So.
Seriously. Yeah. Yeah, from what I understand, like, from talking to other people, they said that they basically have to prove that they can do, like, whatever job they're applying for better than anyone who's native to that country or a resident. Yeah. So, which is, like, crazy.
They some of that. Yeah, they changed some of the language around it. It used to be, you have to be the only person that can possibly do this job. Yeah. Now they just sort of have to, it might be the Brexit. Also, because of Brexit and all the new things that came in, all the names for the visas were different until the first of the year, and then all the names are different now, so I had to relearn all of the lingo that I'd already... So, like, I used to be on the Tier 4 student visa, now it's just a student visa.
Oh my God.
I was switching to the Tier 2 visa, and now it's a skilled worker.
Yeah.
So those, they've changed the requirements slightly, but it still really does come down to, you have to be the right fit for the job, you need to be making a certain salary, working a certain amount of hours every week, and all of this needs to be within a licensed organization. So basically, they need to say to the home office, yes, we are vouching for this person. So on the student visa, the university does that for you. So that's why it's so much easier. Yeah. So my goal originally had been to get a job with the university. Yeah. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Yeah. Because that would have been ideal. I was working part-time for the Seamus Heaney Center at Queen's. It's a sort of an English department, a literature center. And they could only offer me part-time, which was unfortunate. And they tried, my supervisors there were fantastic and really did try to work it out. Other departments, and it didn't happen in the time frame. It's the 6 months is not a lot of time.
No,
it seems
not.
Like it is, and it is not a lot of. It used to be 2 months.
Wow.
And now they actually have just extended it to 2 years. I just missed it.
Of course, right?
The group that started the year after me get the 2 years. So anyone else going in the future, you will have a significantly easier process than I did. But I'm very proud of myself for getting myself through it, but it also was a very stressful period of time.
Yeah, congrats to you. That does not sound like fun at all. All right, so kind of moving into nonprofit sector stuff now. So I know that you're working in the nonprofit sector over there. You did in Boston before that. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your experience in the sector, both domestically and abroad? And do you have any advice for anyone that's interested in going to work in that area?
Yeah, so I've loved all the jobs I've had, sort of in the sector, both here and back in the States. I've done mostly sort of fundraising, marketing, development, program management type stuff, in various capacities. I do think there's a lot of similarities between sort of what I was doing in the States and what I'm doing here. The sectors themselves are set up quite differently. Yeah. That would also be quite Northern Ireland specific. The sector here sort of had to develop to provide services in a time of conflict for groups that felt very underrepresented by the government. So it is a very particular setup here. And so it's been interesting to get involved in that as an outsider. And I'm always going to, with this voice, like I'm always going to be an outsider in the sector. I'm always going to be a bit of an anomaly for them, which is kind of fun. No one ever expects an American accent when they get a call from me work. But I think my experience in the States was really helpful because I worked for a group that fundraised in the U.S. for like education and community development over here in both Ireland and Northern Ireland. And so I think I knew what I was getting myself into from a funding perspective, which is very important, as much as, the charity sector, and community groups exist to sort of help people in specific ways. It does always come back to funding. And so I knew that side of it quite well, which I think was a benefit. In sort of getting involved here, I knew what types of programs we would be doing and where that money would be coming from and sort of what we would realistically be able to do. So as I was applying to jobs, I could sort of apply even though it was completely different, from like the 501c3 status, like all these sort of very technical things is not relevant here. So a lot of my experience seemed irrelevant. But I think a lot of the skills that I built from it in the States were very helpful for my role here. I also think getting involved in volunteering is really important if it's a sector that you're interested in. So back in Boston, I volunteered for a group called Friendship Works, which is elder services in the greater Boston area. So I was a friendly visiting volunteer. I had a match, Eileen, who I would see once a week, which was lovely. I think you met her once.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it was really good. I was involved. They did a walk to end elder isolation once a year. I know you came to that with me one year. So I was sort of very involved in a lot of these volunteer roles. So when I moved, that was something I wanted to do again. It just so happened that as COVID started, this group called Age and I was starting a check-in and chat service, which was sort of similar to what I'd done, but it was phone calls. So you're matched with somebody and you call them on the phone once a week or so. So last June, I started with that, and I've had my match Pat, and we talk every so often, and her son lives in the States, and so she likes talking to me about it, and we have a bet of who's going to make it back to the States first. And, it was a really nice thing for me in lockdown because I lived alone too. And it really was just to sort of reach out to isolated older people. It was like, I am just as isolated as you are. This is great for both of us. But that ended up being my in for getting this job. Was I'd volunteered in sort of the broader sector, but I'd also volunteered with the organization themselves. So that was a really big bonus. And I know it's very hard to sort of say, oh, you just need to volunteer in order to get a job in the sector, because unpaid internships aren't realistic for everyone. And, committing a lot of time every week to volunteer things that might not pay off really is tricky. But I so highly recommend 1 hour a week if you're able to do it, or, just making those connections sort of on the volunteer level to show the charity sector is unique in that you can work in something you're actually really passionate about. I think that's what I love about it. So working with isolated older people is something that has been very important to me for a long time. And so proving that was something that I cared about through the volunteer role to then get to use that to actually make this my career has been fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's a great sector to be a part of, and obviously they're doing good. So it's awesome that you work and volunteer within it, and I'm hoping that some other people want to get involved in other ways too. I think, like you said, I feel like elder isolation is one of those kind of causes that not many people think about or know about. So it's kind of
COVID really brought it back to the forefront. I think once people realized that their grandparents can't leave the house, care home, what's the word in the States? Retirement homes. It's they're having so much more trouble now. I think it's something that's brought it back to the forefront, which is great. And I got involved with it because I'm really close with my grandma, and since I grew up in Connecticut and she lives there, and I don't get to see her, and so it was something I'm like, this is something I want to volunteer with because it's something I care about a lot. But yeah, it suddenly became a hot topic issue just in the last year or so, and even worse still. But it's people are forgetting now. I think as things open up, I just did a fundraising appeal with Age and I for this check-in and chat service that I'm actually a volunteer for, and we want to be able to provide it to more people, because even as sort of Northern Ireland is coming out of lockdown, but older people are still going to be at risk for things the new normal for the rest of us is not necessarily going to be the normal for them. So it's sort of keeping that in people's minds of yes, donate, but also be a volunteer. Get involved, or just, do it in a less formal capacity and check in on an older neighbor that, hasn't seen anyone in a couple weeks, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, great message about that. Let's not forget, it's easy to do, I know, but yeah. All right, so just to close things out, do you have any kind of final advice for anyone that's looking to become an expat by living, working, and or studying abroad?
Yeah, so I think I hit some of this, but read as much as you can about the visa process, but the government language isn't it's so tricky to understand if you don't know what you're looking at. Yeah. You can read the same PDF document 10 times and not actually learn anything. And so I think knowing, but it's also hard to just contact them and ask them questions. So sort of reaching out and finding people who have done it before so that you can ask more specific questions, I found incredibly helpful. I think it helps going through the student route because you automatically have your university to act as that point of contact for you, which is great. But even on the work side of it, I think, before I moved, I joined a few, expats in Belfast, Americans in Belfast, those sort of Facebook groups. And I never really needed to ask anyone specific questions, but I knew if I had to put up a post of, hi, I'm struggling with this part of the visa application, can anyone advise? I've now in that group reached out to people who were asking questions and said, hey, I did this, I can give you some tips.
Awesome.
So it was just, even as I'm trying to come home next month, and theoretically it's all happening, but I've been looking at that group every so often of like, okay, who's actually flown out of Dublin Airport? Who knows what tests we need to have done? Like, it is just a really good resource. And very casual, and in non-COVID times would be quite social. They would do a 4th of July party every year. There's an Ulster American women's group that I'm a part of, and I've never met any of them because I never had time before COVID, but I'm hoping eventually that becomes a thing. And then, so using sort of your university or your job as a resource, but also just sort of, I don't know, like I know the UK process quite well. It's different in every country. Like I thought about going down south to the Republic of Ireland because I do love Dublin. I love Galway. But their work visa process is really different. And honestly, it probably wouldn't have worked for me. So sort of doing that research to see what is realistic, sort of what... There are certain sectors, if you work in like tech or if you work in, I don't even know what else, the sort of more desired ones, whereas there's a million charity sector workers. We're everywhere. But, it's something I wanted to do, so I kind of wasn't willing to sacrifice that. So just, seeing what's maybe realistic as far as the visa requirements in the city you're looking at. Also cities like, you lived in London. London is very expensive. There's a lot of cities that would be quite similar to the US as far as cost. The cost of living in Belfast is so low, and that's been fantastic for me. So it's also very expensive to apply for the visa. It is basically the more money you can make on the visa, the more it's going to cost you to get it, because there's the NHS fees and there's a lot of other things. So the low cost of living has been crucial for me, where I know I can sort of, on what I'm making, I can afford to, live in a decent flat and, have, fun weekends and stuff, but also still save enough to be able to pay for all my visa fees. And just travel. When you live over here, it is harder to get back. And I think, COVID has made that a lot more clear for people, but sort of keeping in mind, you are moving, depending on where you go, you're either moving across an ocean or multiple oceans. And, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily homesick, but there's certain things that, the ease of just getting to see people, it hits you in different ways. And especially right now, it feels different, but, just remember there is always an opportunity, and it's fun to make people come visit you. I loved having you guys visit me. I'm hoping once things settle down a bit, I'll get a lot more visits. So there are, along with it is really hard. There's so many benefits to it. And you can do it for as long as you want. Like I've been here 2 years. I'd say I'll probably stay at least 3. Maybe I don't know right now. And I sort of like that. But there is sort of an option for everyone with all the different kinds of visas, because there's also volunteer visas. There's a lot of routes to make this happen. And so it's just sort of reaching out to people to ask questions, looking into all the different options, and then just going through all of the piles of bureaucratic stuff that the Home Office is going to put you through.
Doesn't make it easy, but hopefully worth it in the long run.
It really has been an amazing time here so far. I'm not in a rush to go anywhere yet. Maybe my family is disappointed about that, but I'm really enjoying being here. I'm thrilled that it worked out, because it was touch and go. I really was not sure it was going to happen. I waited to the last second to tell you guys that I'd actually gotten the visa through, because I jumped the gun before. I got the job offer over Christmas. I was talking over Christmas, I got a job, I'm fine. It fell through on January 5th. So then, So then once the second one came through, I was like, I'm going to wait until I have the actual visa in my hands. And it did work, and I'm really happy about it. But, you have to know it's going to be tricky, and it's going to be a lot of effort, but eventually it's going to work out. And now, I am very happy that I can stay settled here for quite a bit longer.
That's awesome. Well, congrats. We're excited to get you back, at least for a little bit, but
it's been a long time. I'm
your
time
over there while you can, and I'm jealous that you get to hopefully soon explore all around Europe and stuff like that, because it's just so easy from over there. So Yeah. Well, good luck with everything, and that is everything that we have today for questions. So that concludes our talk for today. Another huge thank you to you, Natalie, for joining us and sharing everything that you've learned in the process of studying and working abroad. Obviously, as someone who loves traveling but's a homebody at heart, I find it pretty admirable that you've so seamlessly been able to kind of uproot your life and integrate into a new country time and again. So thank you for sharing your expat life, and I'm excited to see what happens next in your journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And yes, I'm very excited to see you next month.
Yay.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah. And before everyone goes, just a couple quick shout outs. If you want to share your story just like Natalie, please let me know. You can email us at empowermentpodium@gmail.com or message us on our socials. We have an Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok account, all of which you can find by searching at Empowerment Podium or at the links in the description. So give us a follow there to stay up to date on when we'll be going live next and to see some replays of our stories. If you like this stream, please like this video, subscribe to this channel. You can also hit that notification bell to receive a notification every time we post a new video or live stream. And thank you guys all again for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon for another story.